which brings me to a moment I've dreaded and forces me to suspend my long-standing attempt at neutrality. There is no real choice this November. There is only the perpetuation, however flawed and feeble you might perceive it, of our fragile 249-year-old experiment, or the entropy that will engulf and destroy us if we take the other route. When, as Mercy Otis Warren would say, the checks of conscience are thrown aside and a deformed picture of the soul is revealed. The presumptive Republican nominee is the opioid of all opioids, an easy cure for what some believe is the solution to our myriad pains and problems, when in fact, with him, you end up re-enslaved with an even bigger problem, a worse affliction and addiction, a bigger delusion, James Baldwin would say, the author and finisher of our national existence, our national suicide, as Mr. Lincoln emphasized. Do not be seduced by easy equalization. There is nothing equal about this equation. We are at an existential crossroads in our political and civic lives. This is a choice that could not be clearer. Which brings
Welcome to the National Newspaper Publicists Association's Let It Be Known, and it is a hump day, as they say. And when you this Ken Burns, a long, long time I just remember one of his early documentaries, Talking Baseball. Um, this guy is a master documentarian, isn't he? But you hear people like Ken Burns, um, white guy, wealthy white person. And of course, somebody we'll talk about a little bit later, Robert De Niro, and what he was doing yesterday in New York. Robert De Niro loves New York. That's one of the things I love about Robert De Niro is that he loves New York. Um, but when do people from all walks start to pay attention? Even like a Steven Spielberg. And I know that when you start mentioning like a prominent Jewish person right now, that's not it doesn't move the needle in the way that you know, in a profound way anymore at this moment because of what's going on there in the Middle East. But Steven Spielberg, these are people I mentioned them because these are people. So what's on the line for many of us? It's not really on the line for them, but yet they see imminent, clear, and present danger. Um, and you just got to understand that if you had a half a modicum of a brain, that this is uh, people are taking this as serious, are viewing this as serious as it ever got. I remember the 2020 campaign was sort of similar. 2016, there was a lot, there was some of this. You don't want that guy in there, but yet it wasn't so palpable. 2020 became more palpable, and now it's off the charts. And so it makes you wonder why um, this guy whose fate is now in the hands of a New York jury, why is he the front runner? Why is he getting so much support? Um, Someone said to me yesterday, they were talking about the campaign fundraising, and how he's out raising Biden right now. And that individual said to me, "Well, um, the good news is that that money is going to his defense and not going to other to further his cause and down ballot races and other places like that." But it's still, that's a silver lining for many. Why do you have to look for a silver lining when you have someone like this, who is in a position essentially he's in a position to run the country from prison. And I still don't believe that if he's convicted in New York, they're going to put him in prison. I don't think he's going to jail. But it's still the specter of somebody running the United States of America from a jail cell. It's true mafioso stuff, isn't it? It's true gangland stuff. And yet, yet, folks say, well, that other guy, he's too old. Well, this guy is only a couple of years younger. Oh, that other guy, you know, he 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 signed that crime bill, which is the biggest joke. It's the biggest joke of an excuse for if you're gonna be against them, pick something else, especially if you're black or Hispanic. Pick something else because all you Kool-Aid drinking, uh, you Kool-Aid drinkers who followed your pastors and your preachers and your priest, they were for the crime bill. The Congressional Black Caucus was for that crime bill. Pick something else. I'm not here sitting here advocating for one over the other. I'm just sitting here laying out some facts. Biden's a closeted racist. First and foremost, because of the crime bill, where do you conclude that when you got a stark raving, outspoken racist on the other side who says to this day that Central Park Five, the exonerated five, should be in the ground after having their necks dangled from a noose. Yeah, he wanted them hanged. Still does. And Mike, that's what I'm saying, Mike V. Trump has a crime bill for black men too. Not only the Central Park Five situation, but people get a short memory. This guy said the skinheads and the white supremacists were good people. This guy said that when he saw a video of majority black and Hispanic folks stealing from a store, said that once the first thing he wants to do, one of the first things is enact, or not enact, but uh, tell his police force to shoot them down in the street for stealing from the store. Yeah, so that's out of necessity, though. The Democratic National Committee plans to hold a virtual roll call to nominate President Biden before the party's August convention. So the rule, I don't know who scheduled the convention at the time they scheduled it, but the rules are that in order to be on the ballot, even as a president, even as the Democratic front runner or the Republican front runner, you have to have been nominated by a certain time, and their nomination, the Democrats' nomination is late, and so they're going to have to do it virtually. Um, and it's not that they don't want disruptions; it's just that they it's the only way to do it. They're going to be in Chicago, and so they don't want to miss. He can't afford not to be on the ballot in a place like Ohio, and so this is the only step they could take. I've been watching that. That's been an issue for a couple of months now. I'm just surprised that they waited till now to decide this is the way that we're going to have to do it. Probably had to go through Ohio, pour through the law in Ohio to make sure that they didn't get caught out there. But nonetheless, um, we um, we see Ken Burns in his statements using a graduation speech, and as he said, he normally doesn't get controversial. People are stepping out of their lanes because of this situation. And as Robert De Niro was saying, and again, we'll get to that later, the one thing that keeps resonating, and Robert De Niro said it forcefully yesterday. Again, we got to get to it later, but I got to say, the venue was interesting that that the Biden campaign used De Niro in yesterday, but he keeps saying something that, again, folks have to realize this. He says if he gets in, talking about Donald Trump, he's not leaving office. Robert De Niro was very forceful about that yesterday. Again, we'll talk about that. Um, at the top of the agenda this morning, and I know Power 96 is like, you better cover this story. Major League Baseball has taken a historic step to rectify a long-standing oversight by officially, and it's going to happen. In fact, it'll be official at, I think it's 10:30 this morning, incorporating Negro League statistics into historical record. The achievement starting at about 10:30 this morning of about 2,300 Negro League players will be recognized alongside Major League legends like Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb, because for decades, the lie that Babe Ruth was the greatest and Ty Cobb was the greatest hitter uh, permeated. However, those narratives often excluded, of course, and ignored the contributions of African American athletes whose um, greatness was what really kept Major League Baseball from letting black players into the league until 1947, when Jackie Robinson was allowed to play for the Brooklyn Dodgers. Um, and it's still, even after Jackie Robinson, remember Jackie Robinson came into the league, he didn't disappoint. First year, won Rookie of the Year. And you know how tough, because he won Rookie of the Year, it should tell you that not only did he won Rookie of the Year, probably should have gotten MVP, because you know what it took for those voters back then to anoint him as the best rookie, the only black player in the sport. Do you know what it was like for this guy to travel on those buses, and he couldn't stay in the same hotel as his Dodger teammates? He couldn't eat at the same restaurants. He was threatened. The racism, of course, 1947. Think about 2024 and the racism. It's about the same now, right? Um, but the what he had to endure, and how many times, well, they finally got rid of that insidiously bad umpire, Angel Hernandez, yesterday. He finally, for some reason, they brokered a deal. He retired immediately. But imagine how many calls went against Jackie Robinson when he was playing. Obvious calls, and there was no instant replay or nothing like that. But Commissioner Manfred announced that 3 years ago that he wanted to do this. And so they put together this, along with historian John Thorne, this review committee, Negro League's Statistical Review Committee. And so they meticulously incorporated the stats. And now Josh Gibson will now be the all-time batting leader. And it's always a little shade, or they don't want to recognize. They still hold on to this idea that, even though Hank Aaron broke Babe Ruth's record, um, they still want to say Babe Ruth is all-time home run champ, which is crazy because we know Barry Bonds is. But they said that the 800 plus home runs that Josh Gibson hit will not be included in the stats. Um, Josh Gibson's great grandson is on that committee, yes. Um, but all his other stats will be noted. But you think about the legends of the Negro League, the absolute studs. These guys were on the baseball field. Leroy Satchel Paige, who perhaps the greatest pitcher ever. Josh Gibson, as we thought. Buck Leonard. Buck Leonard, he played for the Homestead Grays. He was a first baseman for 17 years, and probably the best glove in the history of baseball at first base. I'm gonna have to say this. Obviously I never saw in person Buck play. He's a Hall of Famer, but Keith Hernandez revolutionized that position, that first base position. So I wonder how close were they as far as skills defensively. There's Cool Papa Bell, one of the greatest nicknames in all of sports. Um, um, the legend has it, and remember Muhammad Ali talked about he's so fast he can turn the lights off and uh, hit the switch to turn the lights off and be in bed before the lights go off. Um, well, the legend of Cool Papa Bell, that's where that came from, actually. That's where Ali got that from. He could get into bed before the lights got dark. But they also said of Cool Papa Bell, he stole 2 bases on 1 pitch. Just imagine how fast you have to be on that. There are others, Pop Lloyd, Rube Foster, who Rube Foster, by the way, was considered the father of black baseball. Ray Dandridge, Leon Day, Bill Foster, Rube Foster's younger brother. So you had family that was dominating. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. Um, these were some amazingly talented baseball players, and you just sort of think about it. We talked about Angel Reese yesterday in the WNBA and how the hate, even though she's elevating the game, her and Camilla and Caitlin Clark, the hate against Angel and the lack of respect for Camilla, even within the game, is so ridiculous because they're elevating it. These guys were on such an elevated, uh, their talent was so elevated. Not only didn't Major League Baseball want them in there, want a black person showing you up in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s. You couldn't have that. But these guys were able to, because you could imagine how Major League Baseball tried to squash, how many times they tried to squash the Negro Leagues, put it out of existence. Can only imagine. But these guys were too good. And they filled stadiums everywhere. They filled it everywhere. And baseball was jealous. Very much so. But this is the right thing to do. Um, And as Power 96 points out, many of the Negro League players were World War II and Korean conflict veterans. And imagine, again, I mentioned Muhammad Ali. You remember the time lost because of the Korean Vietnam War. He wouldn't fight in the Vietnam War, so he was kicked out of boxing. What, 3 years? They took those 3 prime years from him. Imagine he would have truly. There would be no question about him being the greatest, right? But imagine the fact that these guys that we're talking about lost years because of uh, the war, both wars, World War II and Korea. Imagine how much more those stats would be. So they did the right thing for a change, but now baseball needs to do something else. The percentage of African American players in baseball continues to plummet. And allegedly, a few years ago, they were working to make sure that they had more African American participation. Now it's under about 6%. It's what, 900 players, and 6% are black. They need to do something about that. I know the National Newspaper Publishers Association. We have the trade association that comprises the Black Press of America, and we have reached out to Major League Baseball. We've had interactions with them. Steve Arocho my guy in New York, in the Major League Baseball's offices. We've had many conversations. They just don't do a good job of engaging the black press at all. Um, they have not invested in enough in the black community, and that's part of that is with the black press. They have not done it. I like what the Washington Nationals have done in Washington, and they keep a nice relationship with the Washington Informer there, and they have done things in the community in which they've tried to promote the game to African American kids. I played when I was younger. I played in high school. I played in the little leagues. I was a Gold Glover, Silver Slugger too. And there, he just showed the greatest. I don't care what nobody says. I know what Mark Make It Plain Thompson says about Henry Aaron, but the greatest player in history is Willie Mays. And I think it's pretty much a dead heat between Willie Mays and Barry Bonds. I could care less what they say about the steroids. As somebody else said, several other somebody else has said, in every era there was something. There was amphetamines. There was something. Keith Hernandez, I mentioned, was doing cocaine in the dugout, snorting in the dugout. Got arrested, or caught up anyway. But they had that big scandal in Pittsburgh in the early '80s. He had to testify to avoid being prosecuted. They had drug dealers in the clubhouse. And Major League Baseball promoted that steroid era. Mark McGwire looked like some sort of caricature. I didn't even say that right, but you know what I meant. Barry Bonds was a Hall of Famer long before he allegedly did any type of steroid. He had the stats and everything else. Yes, Willie Mays is a Korean War veteran. Power 96. He says Commissioner Landis' name on the trophy was the biggest embarrassment ever. Yep, Kennesaw Mountain Landis. And they did take his name off the trophy. So it's not just the United States where black women are the most, as Malcolm X said, disrespected, least cared for. He did say all over the world. He was not limited to that to, and he's 100% right still. Because black women in London are said to be facing a crisis with higher rates of femicide in the capital than other ethnic groups, according to brand new figures. We're going to dig into that in a moment, as well as the Biden campaign enlisted Robert De Niro to help Capitol Police officers hold a press conference outside of Trump's trial yesterday as they wrapped up their summations and the judge ready to turn it over to the jury. De Niro, and I hope we have at least some, if not his entire presentation yesterday. But it was really interesting that they chose this venue, um, and because they had stayed away from the Biden campaign. I mean, they of late they've been kind of mocking Trump during the he fell asleep at and being the angry guy on trial or whatever. And I think they should exploit that. But but to send the Capitol police officers to New York to hold a press conference across the street from where the trial was taking place and have so the Robert De Niro came because one report said they wasn't the Capitol police officers was not getting the press attention, and so they enlisted Robert De Niro to go and boost that, and hopefully we can bring you some audio in a moment. But we'll also talk about a proposal aimed at launching a task force to investigate the issue of missing and murdered black women in Wisconsin is stuck in a standoff between Senate Republicans and the Department of Justice. There's no respect for missing women of color. We've been bringing that story for years, and of course, the Black and Missing Foundation has been on top of that more than anybody. We'll talk about that in a bit. Mike Tyson, a when I hear about a medical incident on a plane, and when they have to land the plane, now they haven't said exactly what went on yet with Mike Tyson, but he has now said that he's going to be prepared to fight Jake Paul in July after a medical emergency um, that had him shook. Um, I listen. It was a week before he died. Prince had that medical emergency on the plane. So, I wanna mention this, story today, a little bit later, before we, close out, and there's a reason I wanna mention this story. The Son of Sam killer, David Berkowitz, who set New York City on edge with his, murders in the 1970s, was denied parole for the 12th time, yesterday. I wanna mention that story only because, look, we lived it. We lived it. And I remember the blackout, the heat wave, everything was going on in the summer of 1977 in New York. And then you had the 44 caliber killer on the loose. Um, so we're going to talk about that before we close this morning. I just want to get back to black women in London. They're facing a crisis with higher rates of femicide, um, which is femicide broadly refers to the killing of a woman or girl because of her gender, which again highlights the issue of violence targeted specifically at females, and of course, again, specifically at Black females. Um, the figures show from the Metropolitan Police show that of the 21 femicide victims recorded by the police force in 2022, 9 of them were Black. The figure rose though last year when 8 of the 13 femicide victims were Black. The police data also shows sharp instruments were the most common method for killing the victims, being used in 13 of the 25 femicides recorded in 2021, 16 of the 21 in 2022, and 7 of the 13 last year. This organization that's dedicated to assisting marginalized victims of abuse, called Southall Black Sisters, they released a statement calling these findings really, really shocking, but not surprising. They say there's a disproportionate impact on Black women. And again, we use that term a lot, disproportionate. But you know what? They use it in London too. Uh, They use it in London and other places as well. David says that's because guns are not prevalent in the UK. Yep. Big Sis says we were afraid to go outside. She's referring to the Son of Sam. We're gonna get to that in a minute. But they're saying there, Selma Taha, who is in the organization, says that why is the value of Black women's lives so obsolete? She says they're facing a crisis. We need politicians and the police to step up. She says they simply don't care. It's a story that we hear all the time here, but it also shows you that racism, it also shows you that attacks on Black women are not just germane to the United States of America. It's a worldwide crisis. And everything else, you see all the distractions. We see all these protests about this cause and that cause. I have never, you know what? Quite honestly, correct me if I'm wrong, and Greer, I'm sure you would know. When has there ever been a protest, a mass demonstration about the value of Black women and the Black women's lives? Yeah, it's crickets. Yet we want to stop Asian hate. We want to do this. We want to do that. And again, yes, it shouldn't be. I'm not saying that should be Asian hate. I'm just saying we want to get involved in all those other campaigns. David says women were traded for cows and land and therefore are not seen as equal. Right, right. And it's still the case today. Greer says, as a black woman, I'm quoting Greer. Like you get what she as a black woman in captivity for many a years, I ain't seen one. Says she's been in captivity many a years as a black woman. Y'all see that? Um, so let that marinate. Let that marinate. I was talking to some family and friends. I was saying how it's interesting. These kids, not everybody's allowed, has a right to, until Trump gets in office, a right to protest, demonstrate. These kids, they get up, they walk out of graduations, college graduations, university graduation, turn their backs on the president. Some rip up their degrees in protest, which is absolutely asinine, if you ask me. But think about this: it's against the backdrop of student debt being off the chain, your parents paying all this money, and you don't even want to go to your commencement. They spent their life savings, put you through school, and in some cases you getting expelled because you decided to say I'm against the war in Ukraine. I could care less what you're against. I paid to finish your degree. Go get a job, pay off your loans, and then you can stand for whatever you want to stand for. Shoot. Uh, what in the world? Um, so again, as we mentioned, um, the Biden campaign on Tuesday showed up outside of Trump's New York City criminal hush money trial. And I don't think the optics, in my opinion, I don't think the optics of having your campaign go to have a press conference at the trial. Because again, all of this feeds into, oh, um, Biden is behind the prosecution, which he's not. But it feeds into it. The optics are not that great. But more to the point though, so these former police officers, Capitol police officers, um, were there and they brought in Robert De Niro because they really wasn't getting any attention. And Robert De Niro unloaded again. He was reading from a prepared speech, but veered from it a number of times because you could see the frustration. Apparently, somebody wanted him to be more politically correct, and he just wasn't having it. Austin says, "I'm against you acting like you have less sense than you did when you started college that I'm paying for." um, and Robert De Niro says that Trump is dangerous. He says people need to cut the nonsense.
Part of the culture, but not a person like Trump who will eventually run the country. That does not work, and we all know that. Anyway, we make room for clowns, to each his own. But no one takes him or took him really seriously. They take him seriously now, of course. But around the country, people who didn't know him as we did started to support him. They bought into his bullshit. Trump bought their votes with outrageous lies and empty promises. He got the most religious evangelicals to applaud a sinner who bragged about sexual assault. And just a couple of blocks from here, a jury found him liable for sexual abuse. Somehow, he even got self-styled patriots to support a man who called for terminating the Constitution, and on January 6th, rallied an angry mob to threaten democracy, leaving death and destruction in its wake. That's why I needed to be involved and wanted to be involved in the new Biden-Harris ad, because it shows the violence of Trump and reminds us that he'll use violence against anyone who stands in the way of his megalomania and greed. But it's a coward's violence. You think Trump ever threw a punch himself or took one? This guy who ran and hid in the White House bunker when there were protesters outside? No way. He doesn't get blood on his hands. No, he doesn't. He directs the mob to do his dirty work for him by making a suggestion, an inference. And his gang grovels and follows his obvious order. It's no surprise that the murder rate and other violent crimes peaked under Trump and are falling under Biden. And now he's promising to use our own military to attack U.S. citizens. That's the tyrant. That's the tyrant he's telling us he'll be. And believe me, he means it. You're not going to intimidate. That's what Trump does, to try to intimidate. We have to fight back. We're trying to do it all. We're trying to be gentlemen in this world, the Democrats. You are gangsters. You are gangsters. Fuck you. You're a little punk. You're a softy. There's nobody. You're really softy. You're trash.
Yeah, he's been extremely vocal about this and now he's done an ad for the Biden campaign as well. But he part of what you didn't see too, I mean, he was very blunt. He says if Trump, and this is a direct quote, returns to the White House, you can kiss these freedoms goodbye that we all take for granted. And he says, make no mistake, he will never leave. And he went on to talk about his love for New York. And he said, I just came here to remind you of what he is capable of and the violence that he has unleashed on all of us on January 6, 2021. And then he goes on to say, this is not a drill. You know, you have fire drills at school, maybe in your workplace. He said, this is the real thing. The school is on fire. The house is on fire. The workplace is on fire. He was and so again, at the top, you had Ken Burns and then you got Robert De Niro. When you get folks, I'm not saying that because rich white folks are saying it, but it should raise some eyebrows. Because once again, Ken Burns, Robert De Niro, I'm sure that De Niro probably got dual citizenship. Ken Burns probably does too. And as well as he lives in New York, he can probably, I'm sure De Niro can probably live just as well, if not even better, in Italy. It's just about paying attention. Now, the other part of that, Austin Cooper, is that the Biden campaign, they have to wake up. They have to really wake up. There's a report, Politico, saying that Democrats are really, really shuddering. They are basically expressing privately off the record that they fear that this campaign is well behind in the polls and will not catch up. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. Once again, with this track record, really both track records, how could that be? Because again, the bigger issue is you got to look at yourself in the mirror. And the campaign, the Biden-Harris campaign, needs to look at themselves in the mirror. It's like having going to a fight, and the heavyweight is facing a welterweight, and the welterweight is dominating. That's what's going on here right now. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You got a powerful right hand. Use it. These guys, the Biden-Harris campaign, they have a powerful right hand. They have yet to use it. They don't seem to know how to use it, or they seem reluctant to use it. People say, well, what exactly is that right hand? Well, we've talked about it many a times. Biden-Harris campaign, give me a call if you need to know what that right hand is you possess that you don't seem to know that you have, or just don't seem to want to use it. I can talk to you about it. David Youngblood says the Biden administration better get their 2x4s to use in every day and every time they utter anything. Mike V says, I don't think the folks who voted for him actually care about democracy, because when you ask his supporters what has he done legislation-wise that benefited them, they never mention it. They don't. It's strictly about Jim Jones. Because everybody who left San Francisco or wherever they were with Jim Jones and went to that desert, not one of them could tell you what Jim Jones was doing to better their lives. They couldn't tell you what Jim Jones did to make his life better. But yet, they gave their lives. They surrendered their bodies to this man. I mean, you had in the Jim Jones camp, and I'm sure you have it in the Trump camp. You had husbands giving their wives to Jim Jones whenever he wanted. I'm sure that happens in Trump world. I'm pretty sure of that. Look at the Byron Donalds and the Ted Cruz. You don't think that if Trump, Byron Donalds has a girlfriend, I don't think he's married. But if you don't think that if they had Mar-a-Lago and Trump says, let me borrow your wife in my room for, you don't think that, yeah, right. Those guys surrender. Because they're not men. They're not men. Oh, Byron Donalds does have a wife. Yeah. You don't think again. So they went out in the desert, and Jim Jones told them, you're going to drink this Kool-Aid. And there was very, very little resistance. The proposal aimed at launching a task force to investigate the issue of missing and murdered Black women in Wisconsin is stuck in a standoff between Senate Republicans and the Department of Justice. The legislation was brought by Representative Sheila Dubbs, who's a Democrat out of Madison, and it passed the Assembly in February with strong bipartisan support, which is rare. It unanimously passed the Senate Committee on Mental Health, Substance Abuse Prevention, Children and Families, but it was never taken up by the Senate. Democrats tried to bring it to a vote, and Republicans sought to override a series of vetoes from the governor, Tony Evers. Family members of victims such as murdered Milwaukee teenager Sade Robinson and law enforcement officials who want more resources dedicated to the crisis of missing Black women have also called for action. But the lawmakers decided to craft a different task force, or they say a similar task force, um, that dug into the issue of missing and murdered indigenous women instead. See, every cause is greater than the black cause. Every issue is greater than the black issue. And that's what's going on in Wisconsin. They're telling you folks once again, this all is tied to that front runner for president. They're not hiding how they feel about people of color and particularly women of color. They're telling you. So there you know, it's just it's laid out for you. It's laid out there for you. And that's again why when you hear the Stephen A. Smiths, the Ice Cubes, and the minstrel shows do what they do, it's even more infuriating. Mike Tyson says he's feeling 100% following a medical scare on a plane from Miami to Los Angeles. Um, he said it was a medical issue. It prompted an in-flight call for a doctor, a near Mayday call. Paramedics surrounded the plane when it landed, and eyewitnesses who were on the board described the scene as chaotic. And one of the eyewitnesses said Mike had some kind of medical emergency on that plane. Before the paramedics arrived, the flight issued that announcement asking for a doctor. They said the message even came on everyone's screens there that was on the plane. Now Tyson said that he's okay and he will be fighting in July. He says he's doing great. Um, Someone speculated, or at least there's one school of thought that it was nothing more than an ulcer flare up. But one thing we do know that was confirmed by the Tyson camp was that he was nauseous and dizzy, a condition that lasted for about 30 minutes. So everyone else on the plane said they were asked to stay on the plane when it landed, when it made the emergency landing, so that paramedics could enter. And they even said one of the flight attendants said something like, "He's a really important passenger, so we want to make sure he's okay." He said that he mouthed this one guy said he mouthed the words Mike Tyson to the flight attendant, and she nodded yes. Mike, you gotta get a chartered flight, Mike. You gotta be like the WNBA and get a chartered flight. Mike V says, Michelle, first of all, before I get to Mike V, who's absolutely bananas, Michelle Madison asks, was it a panic attack? Who knows? But Mike V says, was he on Spirit Airlines where he had to bring his own snacks? David says Mike is going to hurt Jake Paul. Oh, man. Mike V from the top rope. Look, listen, I'm sure it wasn't Spirit because he'd at least be hospitalized. Uh-oh, big sis, Monique Daniels, she says it was a tactic just in case he loses. He has an excuse. It could be. It could very well be. Oh man, y'all watch hot boxing? Mike Tyson is a mess. I saw an episode a long time ago. I just don't, despite the fact that we have people like Austin and Barrington on this show from time to time, I'm not into all the language that he continues to, Austin with that bad language, But Mike is a hilarious. He's a comic. He is an absolute comic. If you're gonna pick any episode to watch of hot boxing, go back and watch when he had Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns on a couple of years ago. It's the most hilarious episode. He was absolutely stoned, and he was trying to get them to fight. He was trying to egg them on. And they both had their family, their sons and stuff in the backstage. It was hilarious. You got to see that episode of Hot Boxing. And first of all, congratulations. I said it then. Congratulations on that, because to have those two, we had Sugar Ray on our program a couple of times in the past, but to have them two together, even all these decades after their confrontations, it's still a huge deal to have Ray and Tommy on together. Um, but go back and check that out. I'm telling you, it will not be a waste of your time. It will be a time well spent. Hot Boxing with Mike Tyson with his special guests, Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hitman Hearns. You got to see it. You got to see that episode. Oh my goodness. It's one of those things, like when you want some comic relief, like some people like me, I might look at clips of My Cousin Diddy, the two youths, the two what, and stuff like that, you know. But that is one of those things where I go to for comic relief. Mike Tyson Hot Boxing. Um, so it's been what, 44 years, if I'm not mistaken, um, since David Berkowitz terrorized New York City, known as the Son of Sam, the 44 caliber killer. Um, he was denied parole for a 12th time yesterday. And Power 96 says, you remember when some people thought the Son of Sam was Reggie Jackson, number 44? Yeah, I saw the movie Summer of Sam. I'm not, and people will take this the wrong way. I'm not a big, there's only a couple movies that Spike, actually, he's made a few movies that I like, but I'm not like, giddy over Spike Lee's films. But as I say that, then I think about Summer of Sam. I think about Malcolm X. I think about He Got Game, and I love those movies. But what he did in that movie, Summer of Sam, was really interesting. I mean, a lot of it was contrived, but it was understandably contrived. It was one of those things you where you imagine, if you wasn't there, you'd imagine this is exactly how it went and what was going on. And one, he focused in on this crazy Italian-led neighborhood. Um, and these guys can imagine they're sitting there trying to figure out who the son of Sam was, and there's Italian crew. They go to the mob to try and get help, and they're walking around at night with bats and sticks and everything, trying to figure out. They think this Looney Tune guy in their neighborhood might be the Son of Sam, so they beat him down, nearly kill him. And then they're looking at the TV, and it was the year that Reggie Jackson absolutely went off in the World Series. Absolutely destroyed the Los Angeles Dodgers single-handedly. Hit 3 home runs on 3 pitches in 1 game. And he wore number 44. It must be Reggie Jackson. And so these Looney Tunes was plotting to kill superstar Reggie Jackson. So thinking he was the 44 caliber killer. But we were, so 1977, I was 9 years old. But I remember it like it was just yesterday. And that's a saying, a cliche. Remember, but it's true. And I just remember the blackout happened in that summer, and it was the hottest summer. I still believe it's the hottest summer ever. Now, it's probably been summers with that had average temperatures higher, but I don't remember. Even like it's been hot the last several days here, but it feels like it's still about 20 degrees cooler than it was in 1977 during that summer. It was just blazing hot. I remember my family and friends in the neighborhood. We'd sit outside my grandmother's yard, and it was so hot. we was in Manhattan at my grandfather's house. We sleep on the balcony. What's it? Not the balcony. What do you call it? The fire escape. And Spike captured all of that in Summer of Sam. He captured all of that so well, so beautifully. And one of the more recent thrills that I've had, I've met a lot of people. I'm not saying that to be braggadocious, just saying. But one of the more recent thrills was meeting John Leguizamo, who I've always enjoyed thinking. I mean, he's just a phenomenal actor. And talking to him in Washington at the Capitol, at the Hilton, um, talking to him specifically about that role he played in Summer of Sam, and he lit up. He lit up like a bulb. I mean, with all the roles under his belt, and that's my favorite. The way he performed in that. I mean, he was a sleazebag, but he was also cool. I guess in some ways both can be true. Um, he was messing with his wife's sister. But the other side of him was a cool guy. And we talked about it, and he lit up and he laughed and we talked, and it was like, wow, that role. He was so glad it was like he was glad I mentioned that. But I was like, that was the thing that made me come say hello to you. Because all these other, he was sitting next to John Legend and Chrissy Teigen, and there were so many others there. We were it was the White House Correspondents Association dinner last year, and you mingle and everything, and I saw them, but it was him. It was John Leguizamo that I wanted to be able to say hello to, and he was so like cool, like he just like he knew me. He just started talking, and we talked about the Summer of Sam. And so, but that summer was just one, and everything was going on in our neighborhood. And Big Sis, she's watching. She might remember this. I'm pretty sure if I remember, she remembers. She's older than me. We had somebody around at the same time as Son of Sam. This guy who lived in the neighborhood. We used to call him the maniac because he was like out of his mind, and he would at nighttime run out naked and terrorize the block. And I don't know whatever happened to that guy. Hopefully he got locked up or he got the help he needed. But it was like you had the maniac in Queens, in Jamaica, Queens, and then you had the Son of Sam in Yonkers, and all throughout Brooklyn. Because Brooklyn, he was going around the city. He actually lived in Yonkers, and so it was hot, and we were listen, and we ain't had no money, so we were poor people sitting in the yard, just being afraid of the Son of Sam. She says, I absolutely remember that. Being afraid of the Son of Sam, being afraid of the maniac. But the one thing was that we knew that we had our uncles, and they had their crews and everything. So we were kind of inoculated a bit from being too overly worried about violence coming against us, because nobody really wanted to do that because of who our uncles were and cousins were. And so we really had not a whole lot to be fearful of, but the specter of the Son of Sam. You didn't want to if you went for a ride in the car somewhere. Now he wasn't after kids, but you still sit right here. I'll be right back. Is your mom or your uncle? Somebody say, you ain't you ain't leaving me in the car. No, no, no. But it was so scared. And then he would write letters. David Berkowitz would write letters to the New York Daily News, Jimmy Breslin. And the letters, it was like something out of a horror film, because they would print the letters and his handwriting, and there you go. Greer is just always on the spot. Um, it was like out of a horror story, and on the front page of Daily News. And this dude when they got him, and they made a whole Seinfeld actually did a little bit of a recreation, funny recreation of what happened when they caught the Son of Sam. Um, but when they caught him, this guy said they came to his door and he said, "You finally got me." I mean, they just went to arrest him. They didn't say what they were there for. He knew, he had to know, but he just immediately, "You finally got me." And even that, it was so eerie. And so even after they arrested him and he made that simple statement, it still kept New York kind of on edge because it's like, oh my gosh, it was like an aftershock to the earthquake. And then all of those sketches, you see the sketches there, none of them had him right. And so you're looking for someone who is not the Son of Sam. And people are speculating. And it's like Power 96 mentioned they thought it was Reggie Jackson for a moment, not law enforcement. And then
just
we had the
just at a
celebration.
scream of exultation. I don't know, really. And I said to Belle, my wife, the lights are out, and I think there's going to be hell to pay tonight.
In the worst slums of the city, the light of mindless violence lit up the sky as the blackout divided the town into two societies, separate and unequal. In the Bronx, in Harlem, in South Jamaica, in Brooklyn, many of the have-nots abandoned whatever restraint had kept them in check. Tens of thousands of poor became a disorganized army of the night.
There is some sporadic looting in Queens, Manhattan, the West Side, Uptown, and Brooklyn South, Williamsburg, Broadway area.
The cover of total darkness allowed the lowest qualities of previously peaceful people to surface. At first, there was only sporadic rock and bottle throwing at police.
Yeah, and this happened too with about a year after Gerald Ford, who was leaving office, before he left office, told New York to drop dead, that he was not going to send any federal resources. And it was a bad time for so many in New York. And so you had that, and then of course the blackout and the heat wave led to the looting, as you saw there. And all the while, this maniac, this lunatic is running around killing people at random with a 44 caliber handgun. I tell you, New York, big city of dreams. New York, New York. Not everything in New York is what it seems. It's the greatest city in the world. It's the greatest. That's why I love Robert De Niro, because he loves my city. But
The child,
it's amazing.
you have to feel something.
The largest task force in police history went into high gear. Police blanketed Queens and the Bronx with cops in unmarked cars.
Rewards totaling $20,000 have been offered in New York City
Like Donald
for
Trump.
information leading to
on
the
that
arrest
sketch.
of Son of Sam.
That sketch looked like Trump. Maybe Trump was the 44 caliber killer. But yeah, you can imagine 200 calls a day that the hotline was receiving. I mean, it was really, really something. Wish we had more time to talk about it, because it brings back so many things, and then you see how law enforcement has changed over the years. But these serial killers, just now you have so many people who carry weapons. You got so many people who are just one, maybe job loss or divorce or something away from being a serial killer. Look at the guy on Long Island now, the Gilgo Beach killer. Um, folks are snapping left and right. And that was the
News
thing back
station.
then. It was
This
like,
is the new Channel 11
you had to
Action
snap.
News with Steve Bosch, Pat Harper, Jeff Kamen, Jerry Gerard Sports, and Roberto Toronto's AccuWeather reports.
Good evening. David Berkowitz, 24 years old, a postal worker, walked out of his Yonkers apartment last night, turned the ignition key in his car, and found himself surrounded by police. Well, he said, "You got me." Police say those words ended the biggest manhunt in New York City history with the capture of Son of Sam.
He said, "You finally got me." And how did they catch him too? That was the other thing too. He left the gun on the dashboard of the car, and it was parked by a fire hydrant, and they were giving him a ticket. So, I mean, he needed to get caught. The sooner the better. And so any mistake he made, great, but he made a huge mistake. But they were starting to close in on this. And he was young, 24 years old. 24 years old. He said the dog, for those who may not know where he got the moniker Son of Sam, the dog name was Sam, and the dog instructed him to do the killings. And that was the legend of the Son of Sam. He is 70 years old now, and his sentence was 25 to life back in 1977. And naturally, it's been 40. Ironically, it's been, has it been? It's 40. Is that 44? My math. No, it's more than 44. 48. 40, I don't know. My math is off. How many years ago was that? Somebody tell me. But it's been darn 40 some odd years that he has been locked up, and deservedly so. I mean, he killed so many. Does he deserve parole? Absolutely not. If I was a family member, I'm not even a family member. I just remember how terrorized we were. So no, hey, he's got his prison thing going on where he's supposedly helping other people. Whatever. Let that be the rest of his life. And I'm one who is all for compassion. But that dude, he put terror in the biggest city, the most famous city in the world. He a lone person terrorized New York City. That, when you think about it, is amazing. One person. Terror, and this went on and on. This was it took over a year. And this guy terrorized New York City. And this is, again, to close with this. This is what Robert De Niro was talking about with Donald Trump. There's no difference. There's really no difference. So you want him to leave? You might as well make David Berkowitz his vice president. And we will end on that. Folks, thanks for watching Let It Be Known. Subscribe to our YouTube page, and we'll be back at you tomorrow.